the first outdated comment here, just at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, so could you open the issue? Yeah, this one. Yeah, I was.
So basically, Jason said just remove this notation. But if someone wants to have a look at this, they would be welcome.
But please open an issue because there's no way we're going to find an outdated comment.
Okay, I'll do that. And there is another.
That's what I tell people to do, right?
yeah. But I spent too much time on something that I didn't plan to do. So
don't solve the issue, just open it.
yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
You can even point to this comment.
And there is another problem that is blocking this PR, and I don't want to be the one solving, which is a problem with hot, which, well, I understood what Chris Hot does with this submodule thing and stuff, but it looks like our CI is building Coq twice when we are building Hot. It first builds Coq, then it builds Hot, and as part of the build of Hot, it seems to build Coq another time. But an older version of Coq, that's a submodule, and because I removed this compatibility stuff, something breaks in the older version of Coq that is built. So I really don't want to be the one investigating this. And I'd like Jason to do that, especially because he asked for change on this PR and then he didn't re-review it.
So this is only one of the two preliminary steps for the auto chain.
Yeah, so this one just removes the compatibility support. And then on top of that, there is a PR that Mathieu should review that removes the compatibility options for type classes that were deprecated.
So can you give the name of that PR because he is taking notes, and it will help us see the remaining steps before.
So the number is 6824.
6824. Okay.
But you should review.
I got it.
So in this PR 6824,
sorry, can you repeat the number?
6824. There is just one commit to review, that is the last one, that removes a lot of code. It removes 500 lines of code and adds 6. Well,
code and documentation.
Code and documentation, yes. And tests.
So the last one.
Okay. So then, Gaëtan. Oh, you don't have it? Oh, okay. The right one. You don't have any item on the roadmap, Gaëtan?
No, I'm not on the roadmap.
Because you're, for someone who has no items, you're producing a lot of code. Okay.
There is some scale simmer here, which is
Ah, yes, I remember. Can you repeat that sentence? There is a more general item about improvements of the universe API. And basically, the work on that has been done by Gaëtan, Pierre-Marie, and Mathieu, I believe. And so, what is the current status of this whole effort?
We only lack the last part about like treating polymorphic context as really like De Bruyne indices and alpha equivalent in alpha equivalent way. The global naming is there, the cleanups of the API is there. It's just one last feature.
Yes. So is that last part still on schedule for 808?
It's a bit short. Indeed. I have a beginning of test, but it's not ready yet, so I guess we can postpone it. It's really an issue though, because as long as you don't use the wrong API, which is actually flagged as such, like don't use, that should be okay. Like, like functionally, that's fine. It's just exporting an API you shouldn't be using.
Okay.
We like to do that.
There is one last thing on this. On university, there is a PR that I submitted last week, I think, which extends a bit on top of Gator's work, which extends a bit the conversion rule for constructors. That should be merged.
So about that PR, why in unification, why do we still check that the constructors have in inference it says enforce that one is lower than the other.
Yeah.
Why do we do that?
To avoid generating, since the heuristic to avoid generating too many universities.
Can you repeat the answer? Looking at the mic.
Yeah, it's a heuristic to avoid an explosion of universes, but we could try without it. I don't think I tried to benchmark without it, so we could do that.
It's like the stuff I'm doing in my cumulativity PR.
Yeah, exactly. So this one, we need to have a status of it by the end of the week, I think. I mean, it should be mergeable by the end of the week.
And how does it fit in the picture of the previous items you had on your to-do list?
This one is ready. I think it's ready. We can just benchmark with or without this
okay.
This heuristic and see which is better.
Does it need a review or is it reviewed already?
I don't think the benchmark is going to tell us anything because nobody uses creativity.
Yes, that's completely true.
No, but actually, no, the idea is that previously we did unify the constructor universes, so it might be that if we don't do it, we break using stuff.
Yeah, but
even without cumulativity.
That's only for cumulativity.
Ah, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, so probably we should remove template polymorphism, merge with cumulative types, and see whether this affects the.
The true test
is there a way Kamai can move closer to the mic because it's harder to hear
If you
him?
want, we can swap because I don't speak much. Right.
I don't think that's a good idea. You should speak more.
Maybe we can make the tables into a bit of
yes,
that would be
Ah oui, la scène avec une prise à cet endroit-là. Peut-être que tu peux mettre à ma place là.
But my point was not very realistic. I was saying that you could remove. We should probably the only way to get a relatively big code base to test cumulative inductive types is to remove template polymorphism, switch everybody to that, and then see what happens.
Yeah.
Are there some tests already? I mean, some not large use cases, but some kind of simulated unit tests on cumulativity in the test suite?
There are some from these PRs, but not much. The only examples we have are in libraries that Amin developed. We could try to import the big example we have on the unidal lemma thing.
I mean, there are a few examples in the tests, but nothing to do with performance testing.
Yes.
Yeah, performance.
Okay, I see. Did you update the checker?
Is it related?
No, it's not updated in that PR.
We didn't?
Indeed. I said this should probably happen in the checker too, but there was no.
Okay. So.
Yeah, but the checker is completely lacking real support for many things currently. So
So just remove it.
No, but, yeah.
But I have a lot to say about it, but I think it's a completely orthogonal topic, and
Yeah.
at least for the current release, if we want that PR merge, it needs to extend the checker. I mean, in the usual way we do it. And then if we want to change things, I would encourage to have a discussion for the next release. But so that means
we could just run the checker on the test suite already. Why would we do that?
We do that at some point.
We don't do that at all. I don't think it's.
I think
we don't. So the checker has a sub test suite.
Hmm.
But what we don't do, and that I did once in my life, it was an interesting experiment, is to try to generate VO files for all successes that are in the test suite, and then run the checker on them.
Yeah.
So obviously there are often corner cases, because that's regression testing we're doing. And my experience was that there were quite a number of tests that didn't go through. It was not, I mean, not a huge proportion, but still in absolute numbers, it was not close to zero.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we should do that systematically. And the only slight technical stupidity that makes it harder than it should be is that we use invalid file names in the test suite.
Yeah.
Just because of that.
And then, that's the only thing you need to adapt when you, to run it, basically.
We could.
The rest is it.
Yeah, we could just write a script that gives a stupid name to the VO file. That doesn't look very hard.
I think there is no good reason for having a test suite that uses invalid file names.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
either we think the rule is not good and we extend it to allow those names,
Yeah.
or we say the rule is good and then we obey the rule.
And why,
We rename the files.
why do we care that it's just numbers?
We could call them none.
I know it's not a valid identifier as a.
Yes,
As a
exactly.
Coq
So
WG.
we are breaking our own rule.
Yeah, but
So
we
I
can just.
personally don't care how we resolve that, but I found the current situation
Weird.
strange.
We just need to add a prefix, right?
Yes.
So there was a PR about this at some point, no?
Yeah, I wanted to do that at some point to move to GitHub issues,
Yeah.
but for other reason, because at that time I thought that we wouldn't be able to keep the numbers, but finally we could. So I just dropped this PR.
So Pierre-Marie, you also don't have items on the roadmap?
Do I?
So
I don't know.
Maybe
Maybe
as
have a look at the roadmap.
You don't?
you should nicknames too.
really? Yeah, well, there is a universe thing we already discussed.
Yeah, that's.
This seems to be all. So if something's missing from the roadmap, please let me know. And the other thing I wanted to say that applies to all of you is during this discussion that we're going to have to wrap up soon, and later during the working group, so please have a look at all the PRs of which you're the author, and set the milestone in a realistic way.
Yeah.
So if you still think the PRs should get in 8.8, please use the 8.8 beta 1 milestone at this stage.
Let's do that.
And if you think it's not going to make it, then please use either the 8.9 milestone or just remove the milestone if it's a very long-term thing that is not meant to be ready.
Or you want to do this
Well,
before lunch, maybe?
Well, you can do it through, while we speak and do other things.
Yeah.
But the point is, I would like when I click on the milestone on GitHub by the end of this working group, I would like to have something that reflects the current objectives. All right, so that's about it. So here we have Enrico. Aha. So this is the porting of SSR intro patterns to the new monad, I believe. I'm not sure. Does it include the work on Quill as well? Probably it's the other one.
No, this is just porting to the tactic mode.
I think you meant both because it's the only item.
So porting the patterns we had before is done. This has not been merged because we're still documenting, discussing, whatever.
But it's also a bit argued against by Emilio, so I think we can discuss it later. But Emilio, because the design of the engine doesn't suit him, or
I wouldn't say he's against. He thinks that there is a better way to do things.
But I'm talking specifically about the porting part. And I mean, I think he doesn't. If we agree the design of the engine is not the right one, he doesn't see the value in porting. And this is not about the Quill intro patterns, which add new features, but it's only about the porting part. So maybe we want to resolve this at some point during the working group.
Yeah, but I don't think. I mean, Emilio, at some point we are right, but I don't think we have a solution. So
yeah, no. But my point is that if you want this merge, it would be better to have a quick discussion.
To me.
So Emilio will arrive after lunch.
My impression is that it would be easier anyway to port. Imagine that we have a third iteration on the type of tactics. I think it would be easier to go from the current state of the intro patterns to the next one rather than the original.
Yeah, exactly. This you don't know until you see what the third step looks like.
So
it looks a lot like what was before.
My guess is that anyway we'll have a monadic structure because that's like the bread and butter design pattern of functional programming.
I think you should keep that for Emilio.
Yeah, right. But,
and you should prepare your weapons.
What you say is not true.
What I mean,
I hope you prepare them all night. Emilio did. But it's an interesting discussion to have. It's just that I hope we can decorrelate the discussion and the long-term design from the short-term merge of those PRs. I hope so, and I would like this part to be clear at the end of the working
year. Also, the porting is not just about replacing one type with the other. I mean, all the code has been rewritten.
Yeah, I know well. I mean, so I'm supporting it, but I'm saying that we should have a discussion specifically on the short-term future of those PRs to be clear that everyone is okay with them being merged, so that we can do it.
And then go back.
But that's the only one I found.
Yeah, but there are two PRs actually. Well, there are three, but one is just the B2B infrastructure. One is porting the intro patterns as they are. And one is adding a few new ones. And I don't think we are ready for 8.8 for the last one, because especially the code.
Which one? The new features?
Yeah, the new features. I mean, some of the features are crystal clear, some are not. And I mean,
which
the code has been written.
I'll show it on the screen.
Yeah, put it on the screen. Yeah, these.
So just before we look at that, so the problem, Emilio made the argument that he would be in favor of the porting and stuff if it made this one possible. But if this one doesn't go in, then he doesn't see the point of porting.
Porting. What do you mean?
I think he meant that he's okay with the porting part if it's a prerequisite of this one. Porting, for the sake of porting, to an engine that is going to be redesigned, he questions. But he'll say that.
But I still maintain that
this kind of argument. I don't like this kind of argument. I'm sorry.
But we're okay. I'm just telling you so that you get prepared. Because you answer not to me, but to Emilio. Right? Well, I did the porting, so I'm supporting it.
No, but I mean, the point is to be realistic on the time frame. If we design the tactic layer and it will take other 5 years, then I don't want this to be delayed 5 years.
Yeah.
I just said that I think it requires more testing, and I have no time.
And documentation, I think, the main.
This could be written, but it's
But
the
not
testing.
all.
I mean, more specifically, there are a few of these that I'm still not 100% convinced what we should do.
Yeah.
For example, the tactic one is a bit weird to me yet. Still, and others are crystal clear. I mean, the block intro pattern, I think, is crystal clear. The plus two, I mean, it's.
Yeah, also Theo had some questions, so I mean, okay. Delaying
The last ones are at the bottom.
No, I posted a message tonight, or.
Yeah, yesterday. I'm sorry I took so long, but if you think that it's going to be delayed to 8.9, then it's not really a problem.
Yeah, that's my point.
My point is that I don't want to add a new feature unless what?
What is well?
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, but.
I don't want to add a new feature unless the semantics is perfectly clear, and so it takes more time.
Yeah.
Okay, I know the story. The syntax is. I don't think there's a problem with the syntax.
I don't think either, because it's well limited, but that's fine.
Can we summarize what we talked about 3 PRs? Can we summarize what is?
So the 2 remaining candidates for this release are 2 of the 3 PRs we mentioned. One is about porting the SSR intro patterns to the new engine. And
Do you have a number for this PR?
Yes, 6700.
But I think you didn't mean a random number.
Ça va très bien. I'm happy with that.
Intro pattern.
And the other one, which is a bit more controversial, maybe, is so we need to discuss it during this
what you call the infrastructure.
Is the state one.
The state one. What?
Yeah, there is the
Goal state. Why? That one looks reasonable to me.
Oh, yes, that's the one
But Emilio
doesn't like.
to discuss it.
Yeah, well, we can discuss it, merge it, because, like, yeah, it completely makes sense.
I agree.
I think so. I mean, it's my code, but
The main limitation is that you have to work around yeah, well, mostly, even though it's supposed to work in presence of the compatibility layer, I'm pretty sure there are nice interactions that seem to limit that, but at least in the new code, it's completely clear that we want that.
Sorry, I lost that.
Java is supporting the state PR.
Yeah, but there must be something fishy in the way we explain it. I mean, either Emilio is burning out, or there is something fishy in the way we.
Well, yeah. At some point, I talked a lot with him, including offline and during the night. And at some point, he posted a message saying that he had misinterpreted the notion of goal. So yeah, part of it is getting resolved. But
I think he's mixing the proof level and the tactic level.
yes,
it's
well,
right to complain
yes
about
and no. Yes and no. So initially he was, but now he's starting to get the feeling that it's simply the thing that is built in the wrong order. But he will explain that.
Okay.
So 67.
So what else?
6700 is everybody agrees with that,
Yes, I guess.
and 6705 is just going to be delayed.
It's a feature, so probably, yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's fine. We will try to get it ready soon, though.
Hmm.
But not for,
No, I mean,
not for immediate release.
what is missing is not, I don't think the code is particularly buggy, but needs to be tested. So
Yeah, and documentation. We can,
Yeah.
try that
It's
one.
not the, it's one of these examples where you think the code is correct, but the design should be thought about.
yeah, maybe.
We could even add it to a plugin.
Yes, I was actually thinking about, like, the fact that we merged SS Reflect into Coq is that now reflecting the same release. So this is a feature that is often going to be a Coq implementation. It's a bit of a shame though, we have to stick to the same release schedule.
Yeah, but the code.
Well, I mean, we have a release every 6 months, which
Yeah,
is
it's not that
more
bad.
frequent.
I'm not really complaining though.
That's also something that I was pointing to in my last comment, which is that SS Reflect showed a model where you develop tactics outside of Coq and you test them a lot before integrating them. And this was a model that was argued for, in particular by Maxime, for new tactics in general. And so, but now that SS Reflect is part of Coq, there is a risk that we switch to a model that looks more like the old model for developing tactics. That is just we put more and more and more.
There is one thing I didn't like about the old model, which is that what you described was happening, but at the same time the system was shipping with closely integrated tactics that were not really tested as much, and things like that. So I don't know, but okay. My feeling is that this is also related to the discussion on the distribution of plugins that we release with Coq, but are not necessarily completely very tightly integrated. So I mean, the design space is huge, and you can think more about it.
Even as of today, SS Reflect is not that tightly integrated because people trying to mix, for instance, primitive projections and SS Reflect are encountering the flurry of problems.
People who are trying
It's
to
not true only. It's not true only of SS Reflect.
Yeah, that's only
well, okay, fine, but
Well,
we've got very
I
adventurous
PR
users.
last week about the virtual machine and primitive projections, and I can assure you,
Universes.
canonical
yeah,
structures.
universities.
So it's nice.
But so isn't Pierre Letouze joining the working group at some point?
He said to me that he hesitated to go because he didn't like the idea that it was remote.
He didn't like the idea that it was remote.
Okay.
Interesting. But he also doesn't like to. I mean, okay. At least then, could you ask him to update the roadmap and tell us what from his items what are still on schedule or not?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is that on vacation? Yeah.
It looks like this last days he has been active on GitHub and all. So maybe there is a hope that some of his stuff is going to move forward, but I don't know much.
Yeah, I sent an email to him a week or so ago, but he told me it was still unclear for all items. So okay.
Okay. So I guess I would get the same answer.
Well, but that was more than a week ago, and I guess it should become clearer now. So Yves, yeah, this is an interesting one. Sorry. Okay. Exactly when we reach Yves in the roadmap. It's a plot. So I remember this one. So at some point during some working group, Yves mentioned this problem with proof-using error messages not being located in the way that made sense for the user. And initially, I thought, oh, this should be really easy to fix. So I encouraged him to fix it, and then I realized it's close to impossible with the current model, because what you would like to do
It depends. You know, if you just want the error message to contain the right line, saying the place where you should fix, you know, problem is the error is detected at another place than the one where it is written. So the place where you should fix is not the place where you detect it. And so if you just want to have an error message that has the right line, it's not a problem. I think it won't be too hard to do. But that in the various proof development environments, then you have a problem is that I don't know whether these proof development environments expect to have a command raise an error at another place in the document.
Especially for Coq in the current model, it's not. I don't think. Yeah, maybe we could improve that. I don't know actually. Do you know, Enrico, if it's supported?
Not today. I mean, the point you can do that with what they call feedback, but Coq doesn't understand that. So actually, I don't know after the refactor.
Doesn't everything go through feedback now? Doesn't everything go through feedback?
No.
Yes, but
No.
uh,
Yeah, and then he backtracked. I think. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's again. This is a question for Emilio.
well, I don't know in Coq. Yeah, we should ask Emilio, but anyway, Coq cannot tell you this line because it has the function of this line. If you say before you made a mistake.
That's what I thought, but now that I think more, one thing you can do in Coq is you can paste several lines or read from a file. And so Coq has a way of repeating the line and giving those signs saying where the error is or was. So it could repeat the line even if you provided more input.
Okay, the question is it possible to report a decent message in Coq?
So basically, when you input 5 lines and there is an error in the second, Coq already repeats the second and shows the error, even if it's.
I might be missing the point, but who is using Coq?
Debuggers.
In general,
I use it for debugging.
Yeah, but that's a interaction problem. Like it's the problem is all. Yeah, okay, fine debugging, but if you're
So if we go into the who's using what framework, in the last months I've been trying all the interfaces I knew for Coq, and to be honest, if I
that was the right time.
this is the landing gear. How do you hear?
Oh shit.
There is a third one.
Yeah. We can't hear you.
Wait, are you behind the plane?
I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but
that's better.
So now it's a bit too low. Can you get something in between?
I'm in a train. It's okay. I will mute myself.
Okay. We hear like a plane.
We have the train, yeah.
Well, at least we can hear you, so it seems to work not too bad.
I'm afraid Emilio can follow the. I'm afraid Emilio can follow the conversation right now, but he will have to stay in mute mode most of the time.
Well, now okay, at least.
Are you with us?
We can
wait until this afternoon.
We could talk to Emilio and look at his answers on GitHub.
Yeah, GitHub is probably more.
All right, so. Oh, he left. Okay, well, we'll see. Oh, Enrico, did you get any news from Asia about improving the SS Reflect chapter? I think this was related to the porting of that chapter.
So what did we we discussed about, I'm sorry,
Yeah, we didn't finish.
there was the noise.
Sorry.
So for this possible improvement to the proof using interface, I think it should be. I don't know what you have to say that there's no solution for now, and I don't know when for which version will be delayed. It's indeed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't. Well, we could target the next version and see if Emilio has a technical solution to suggest. Did I? Yeah, I forgot. Change one. So I'm trying to convince Vincent that working on the Coq WG is a very nice activity. And I made kind of a mistake. So he was working on attributes, and he reached the point where some of the commands he was studying had non-uniform behavior that needed to be addressed probably at some point before the syntax for attributes were applicable to them. So the normal thing would have been probably to start with the other commands, the easy ones, and apply the new syntax to them. But of course, we're interested in difficult things. The command I suggested he looks at was instance, which wasn't the easiest one. So I apologize for that. But the good thing is that maybe later in the working group, but even just a bit now, Vincent can tell us about the stages of making the semantics of instance more uniform and adding the attribute syntax.
Well, concerning attributes, I think this should be delayed. Maybe there will be some minor changes in the vernacular, but nothing concrete, I guess, on attributes. And yes, I think there is a slot later about instance, but I'm not sure what you want to be discussed now, Maxime.
Oh, okay, just the status. So we delay the attributes, and about instance, are you planning to have a patch for this version? Doing something?
I think what we could do is duplicate some of some strange stuff of instance that may help later on.
Yeah, we didn't. Why didn't we do it at the time? Like the fact that you can open a goal silently. I think for last version we thought about deprecating that. No.
But there is a slot about that, so we can discuss that. Okay. Yeah, I'm realizing I completely blew up the schedule already. So, but I think we're done with the roadmap. So thank you.
Good.
This question about
Oh yes, just the status. Did you?
Me, I mean, at some point we decided to just port the manual to Sphinx and not change the code. So I think it will be
for the next version. Sounds good. Yeah, the porting to Sphinx I could do. I will try to mention it tomorrow maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a specific topic. It's going on. If you haven't claimed a chapter, please do and port it. Thanks. Yeah, that's about it.
Please merge Paul's request on your thing.
Yeah, well, okay, it's a bit more complex.
But approximately, how many % of completion are we now?
I'll make a more specific report because I don't know the exact percentage, but basically, only a few chapters, like 3, have haven't been claimed.
Yeah.
Right. Now, how many haven't been ported? More.
Yeah.
I think that half of the manual should be done already.
Yeah, we're halfway there.
Yes. And the people are submitting PRs like every day, so
okay.
So it's hard to tell where we are. But okay, we'll probably need some support from people who didn't port stuff yet. And I'm working on merging the infrastructure as soon as we can in master. All right. So there was a break schedule, but I heard some of you had a break in the metro. Coming.
I didn't have a break. I need a break.
But can we make it 5 minutes?
10.
What slot can I remove for you?
Well, I already removed my slot, so.
Okay, so at 22.
At 22.
Okay. All right, starting.
We convene. It's power. Et le café.
On avait l'idée du café pour le. Non, je sais si tu veux le faire. Pour ça, je peux regarder. C'est quoi ton intention? Mon intention, c'était que ce soit que l'internet soit la même qu'avec la définition, mais juste que par défaut, ce soit pas comme d'être. Et donc, et qu'en particulier, on ait le droit d'écrire. Sur la bonne. En particulier, on a le droit d'écrire machin sans la notation de points. Parce qu'actuellement, comme la définition, actuellement, on peut faire les mains machin, point, et ensuite faire c'est juste une sorte de partie. Ça, je pense que c'est essentiellement ça. Il faudra. Enfin, ça peut pas être. Ça peut pas être dans le. Enfin, géré de manière parallèle. Enfin, ça peut pas être catégorisé pour la SNF comme dans Coq, les définitions, plutôt que comme l'élève, parce qu'il ne peut pas faire ça de manière parallèle, en particulier s'il ne connaît pas la notation de type. À la limite, s'il la connaît, oui, mais bon, enfin, ça n'a pas forcément un intérêt fou. Si justement s'il la connaît, il pourrait le faire. S'il la connaît, il pourrait. Après, ça dépend à quel point c'est compliqué. C'est juste qu'il est censé intéresser de ça. Oui. Et oui, non, mais le truc, c'est que quand j'ai commencé à regarder ça, et j'ai vu que actuellement les règles de syntaxe pour lemme, définition, théorème, fixe post étaient très bizarres. Enfin, en gros, je pense qu'il y aurait des modifications à faire. Juste une question par site. Donc, j'aurais bien voulu au même moment, et si je voulais faire ça nécessite de prendre beaucoup de temps. J'ai même, au moment où j'ai commencé à regarder ça, évidemment, j'ai ouvert des fichiers sur le web.
Vous voyez un truc blanc derrière?
La neige, ouais.
Ouais, c'est incroyable, hein.
Quand j'ai réservé le meeting, il neigeait à Paris. Quelques semaines. Mais là, c'est plutôt ici. Hein.
Ouais, mais d'ailleurs, on a remarqué avant vous, parce que nous, on avait ça directement sous les yeux, alors que vous étiez dos.
Eh oui.
C'est impressionnant.
Attends, c'est ça le truc?
Ouais, c'est ça notre micro, oui. Ah oui, d'ailleurs, vous ne nous entendez plus.
Si.
Mince alors.
Il y avait marqué microphone activé.
Oui, en fait. Ah, là, vous ne nous entendez plus. Ah,
ça a l'air d'être vrai cette fois-ci.
Ouais. Ah, vous ne nous entendez plus. Ah. Vous nous entendez de nouveau.
Oui, ça peut marcher.
Et vous nous entendez tout le temps ou...
Là, oui, mais tout à l'heure, je pense que quand tu parlais, non. Non, en effet.
Non. Bref, à plus.
Et on est toujours en live sur YouTube en plus, non?
Oui, bien sûr.
Bref, donc à un moment donné, je voulais juste ouvrir une autre une issue pour écrire mes intentions par rapport à ça, histoire que quelqu'un puisse le faire à ma place éventuellement, mais rien que ça, je ne sais pas comment le faire.
Est-ce que c'est là-dedans?
Alors, ici, maintenant,
Je cherche une définition.
en fait, le truc, c'est que oui, donc, en fait, il y a différents trucs qui mènent à différents trucs.
On voit qu'il y a des théories tokens, il y a des definition tokens,
Et genre, par exemple, Fixpoint, c'est divisé en deux, c'est des fois dans un. Non, il y a. Enfin,
alors, Fixpoint, tu dis que c'est.
qu'est-ce que je. Voilà. Tu parlais de là où sont définis lemma, théorème, Fixpoint, définition.
Alors, Fixpoint, il est
C'est un
défini à
peu-
part, simplement.
Non, mais il y a deux trucs de Fixpoint. Enfin,
Il y a Fixpoint et la Fixpoint.
Non, mais il y a aussi
Dans
Fixpoint.
le programme, c'est encore géré différemment.
Il y a les mains, quoi. Enfin, il y a mutuelle de récursion.
Oui, voilà, c'est ça. Enfin, il y a lemma with, oui, c'est ça, c'est lemma with. Enfin, bref.
Ah, il y a reg definition qui peut exister. Là, identifier de manière type.
Qui aussi d'arriver à la cour. Qui aussi d'arriver à la cour.
Non, c'est juste que ouais, encore un tard parce que les clés étaient bloquées dans le.
Les clés.
Tout à fait, les clés.
Qui a amené les clés?
En fait, les clés étaient dans le bureau de quelqu'un, mais.
Est-ce que c'est un escape room où il faut trouver les clés?
C'est ça. Ça fait un métro à.
Rien faire.
C'est pas très passionnant.
Qui c'est qui était dans le.
Quelqu'un de l'administration.
Ouais, donc en fait, tu parlais ici.
Non, je regardais pour son image de point égal, j'essaie de voir un petit peu ce que c'est les photos et des et tout.
Ouais, j'étais dans la lobby avec ma mère.
Mais les fixpoints sont définis d'un seul endroit, c'est juste que la définition est optionnelle. La partie 1, 2 points égaux, machin, c'est optionnel, c'est tout. Et ensuite, ça a l'air d'être géré de la même façon.
Mais il me semblait que c'était géré. Ok, bon, en tout cas, il y a. Enfin,
non, je regardais pour son image de point.
en tout cas, il y avait un certain nombre d'incohérences.
Une question à te poser. Pour régler ce truc, c'est qu'on fait les points.
Toi, tu sais que c'est pas ça. Le truc de la peur, c'est qu'en fait, ça passe pas. J'ai l'impression que ça va déconner si tu essaies d'évaluer un fixe de prochaine tactique. Parce que si tu essayes de faire ça, tu vas probablement avoir des ennuis.
Tu veux dire une tactique qui envoie une option?
Non. Tu fais by tac. C'est un truc qui est encodé par option tactique. Et alors là, la sémantique de tac fait des trucs étranges. Et je suis à peu près sûr que tu vas avoir des emmerdes dans ce cas-là.
Dans quel cas? Dans le cas où tu fais quoi avec ça?
Ça change très fort.
Dans le cas
C'est par rapport à quoi que tu
c'est le fixe de ML.
C'est cette histoire de tactiques qui sont dans. C'est
dans
par exemple, une chèvre, fonction, machin.
Le bug de 1800.
C'est ça, le bug qui n'a jamais été réalisé.
Tout à fait le Linux,
Mais,
sur lequel il faut encore aller celui.
parce que je pense que ton fixe, tu vas marquer dans cette disant sans écart. J'ai l'impression qu'il y a les trucs foireux, c'est quand tu commences à mélanger, ça passe pas à la. Je suis même pas sûr que la solution ne passe pas au type composé. Bon, évidemment, c'est rare le type composé parce que, genre, une baille tactique, par exemple, ça fait une option. Donc, ça, c'est évalué. Il va évaluer le truc de manière rigueur, il risque de louper, je pense. Il utilise.
En
tout cas, il y a quand même, on doit faire quelque chose à propos de toutes les anomalies qui sont là depuis des années, parce que.
Je pense qu'en première approximation, on peut un peu
Oui, non, mais transformer en erreur. Ne serait-ce que transformer en erreur.
Non, c'est pas une erreur, c'est un bug, c'est NTAC.
Oui, non, mais tu comprends que les anomalies, à chaque fois que quelqu'un les rencontre, il y a marqué plus.
Celle-là, surtout, elle est.
Il y a marqué le duplicata automatique.
C'est marqué.
On a une anomalie.
Ça, c'est une erreur.
Ah ouais, il a raison.
Non, c'est comme je sais pas si c'est le même.
On pourrait, pour certaines anomalies, avoir un truc pour dire donc do not report si bug machin directement dans le message d'erreur.
Je sais pas.
C'est juste que c'est pas. Si at this.
Ah mais parce que tu fais
URL.
un truc qui funk, donc essaye de mettre.
Bah ouais,
essaye
c'est la
de
solution.
non, mais ça, c'est pas la solution, je veux dire. À l'intérieur du truc là, il détaque. Voilà, non. Ça, parce que ça va marcher. Ok, c'est pas ça que tu veux ici mettre ici. Alors, mais juste un net qui sert à rien parce que Magical en plus il fait des trucs rigolos quand tu renvoies une technique. C'est juste un net c'est égal, voilà ce que tu veux. Des tags, des trucs. Et side x, tiens, c'est une x point virgule exactly.
C'est ton fixe même que tu testes. Après, sans le fixe, ça, je pense que ça marchait déjà.
En pratique. Hein
ça, je pense que ça marchait déjà sans le fixe.
Attends, j'ai déjà un fixe.
Oui, je pense.
Alors, voilà.
Parce que le bail, il n'y a aucun problème.
Comment ça, le bail?
Il n'y a que quelques tactiques qui utilisent le truc qui pose réellement un problème, en fait.
C'est les tactiques qui prennent un tactique. C'est les tactiques qui sont écrites dans la mail et qui prennent un retail tag.
Ouais, mais il y en a très
normalement, option retail tag, il doit provoquer le même problème. Parce qu'il est valide, parce que le chemin. Il y en a pas. Il y a Education qui doit faire ça. Non, parce qu'Education, maintenant, il est écrit avec une tactique. Parce que tactic notation et. Ça fait pas la même.
Non, attends. Education, il a le problème.
Ah, Education, il n'y a plus le problème en 8 depuis la 8.
Ok, oui, d'accord, c'est
plus convient. Parce que Education, il est écrit avec une tactic notation.
Tu as raison, effectivement.
Mais il y a
un shell, par exemple, qui a le
problème. Donc on pourrait écrire un shell.
Ça marche, ça. Mais, comment je sais pas, j'ai trouvé ça peu d'exemple en fait. Effectivement, on a fait des blagues.
C'est pas très dur. Tu fais juste un graphe dans les tous les cas.
Je cherche quoi exactement?
Tu cherches juste tactique parenthèse. Là, il faut mettre un slash parce que ça ne peut pas. Je pense qu'il sera content. Avec les kémiques, tout cela, ils vont poser des problèmes. Ouais, alors, et ceux qui n'ont rien, d'ailleurs, il y a un anti-flash bit parce qu'en plus, il ne faut pas avoir tactique off. Je pense que je vais être toutes celles-là vont poser problème.
Ah oui, on a déjà 2 minutes de retard. Mais...
Ouais, nous, on est tous là.
On est prêt. On est prêt.
Enfin, on était prêt.
Ça va déconner aussi.
Ok, ça je viens de croire.
Oui, tu n'es pas
ça prend pas la même, ça prend pas le même chose.
C'est super.
Et donc c'est un peu bizarre parce que c'est un workaround. Je peux dire, mais normalement, ce serait bien de mettre le problème, c'est qu'il est. Ah, mais c'est mon truc, c'est un workaround. Ça devrait pas être valide.
D'un autre côté, on a bien
remonté ça. C'est un workaround.
Des jeux sur les divers.
Si on peut jouer sur la terre, je comprends rien.
Bon.
Bah, il est où, Maxime?
Ouais. On aurait pu commencer, mais on a perdu Maxime.
Ben alors,
voilà.
On a dit 22, là, on est là.
Voilà. On est mal barré pour le mec qui a l'air super nerveux avec le schedule.
Ouais.
Peut-être qu'il est tombé sous la neige.
Pure instance.
Oh là là, mon Dieu. Enrico fait du prologue maintenant. Enfin, maintenant. Dans les commentaires de Puritex.
Et à peu près de. Je sais pas.
Non, mais on devrait réimplémenter tout Coq en prologue.
Mais c'est pas le but d'Enrico, ça?
C'est pas l'erreur fondamentale de croire que le prologue se scale. Genre, dans les années 90, on sait ça.
Écoute, si vous faites
oui, c'est bien, c'est exactement ce que je suis en train de dire. Alors, genre moi, au MPI, là, je suis entouré par des gens qui s'arrachent les cheveux parce que ils usaient des typecasts pour faire des trucs sordides. Disons ça en français comme ça, personne ne comprend. Mais c'est pas ils veulent faire des choses, c'est juste.
C'est possible, non?
En théorie, c'est pas très modulaire, les typeclasts, ça pose des problèmes.
C'est simple.
C'est pas simple, c'est un modèle de calcul un peu parole quand même pour le gamme.
Ça, c'est les bullshit des 11h26.
Alors, non, il y a même des gens qui travaillent Airbnb et qui nous racontent des bugs sur Coq.
Ouais.
Là, bon, c'est quelqu'un qui utilise la 8.6 et qui.
De bonne qualité fermée, là.
Airbnb ici.
Ça s'appelle Coq, c'est
Oui, mais c'est bien qu'il y ait des gens qui travaillent dans l'industrie qui fassent du Coq.
Vous allez chercher un café tout en bas?
Il faut faire Maxime, à l'homme là.
Tu sais qu'on
Écoute,
était
en
tous
retard,
prêts,
tu sais? Tu devrais avoir un blâme, là. Hein?
Pardon?
T'as un blâme, hein?
J'ai bravé une tempête, monsieur.
Même à Pierre 2,
Ah, mais c'est celui qui
il
a
le faut se
fait
café
My
ici, c'est
Manager.
le type qui organise, il n'y a rien.
Il y avait une pause café à Pierre 2?
Bah ouais.
C'est payé par deux, oui.
Moi, j'ai payé par la fille qui m'a donné un jeton.
Bon. Donc, juste maybe an update on the program. So we're going to delay the primitive projection discussion for tomorrow so that Mathieu has time
After
to prepare.
delaying items of the roadmap, now we delay discussions.
Non, il a de
No, but Mathieu already said that you might have time to prepare for tomorrow, so it's better if you can get a chance.
Yeah.
So now we can discuss either instance. Maybe Enrico didn't want okay, if we have to skip something, I think the wiki discussion can be skipped for now. And then we try the last point and we see where we are, okay?
Yeah.
So maybe instance, since we started to talk about it,
yeah.
We can dive more. I'm not sure who. Sorry. I'm not sure who actually wrote this on the working group program. Maybe it's Gaetan. No, it's just to know, so you may have more to say, Gaetan. I guess Vincent has in Mathieu. So this is not just about what to do for 8.8, but more generally what to do with instance for each thing. Who, when.
Okay, so it's about syntax and some features that are unique to instance. So I have two examples. Can you read?
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
Yeah, it's okay.
Maybe it's too big.
No, it's fine.
Fine, right. So there is something you can write. Yeah, there is this syntax that allows to bind at once in a type and in the term. So what I mean by this is here, after the column, you can write forward, and here you bind an X. And this X occurs in the type. So this is the class. We are defining an instance of some class, C1, which is parameterized by value. And in the body of the instance, you refer to the same X.
Yeah.
It is not really the same X. If you print what is actually defined, you will see that there are two binders, one with a lambda and one with a forward.
Yeah.
So sorry?
So this is not fun. You should have made a quiz.
Okay, I'm not used to the rules of the working groups.
So is that used now? Is that used today? You know?
Not much. There is a file in the library like decidable class, I think, that defines some instances of the decidable class. and that's it. And also, I tried to remove this syntax, and it broke in the test suite. No, in the
Travis?
continuous regression
Yeah.
concept, and it was, I think, also in the decidable plus file.
Yeah.
That defines more instances of the decidable class.
Okay.
So nobody uses it more.
So you just copy paste, and I don't think the feature is I don't think it's even documented.
Is it a feature or a bug?
So the thing is, what happens is
there
that
is something in the manual that described this syntax, but I could not understand what it says about it.
Ah. Instance, you have to check that the conclusion is a class. So you just display the dependent product and you use it for the record. Because of course the record cannot be of type for all something. So you just bind these previous arguments as lambdas. But I don't think it's very.
But I don't understand why you want this when you can just write. Sorry. You can just move the column here.
Yeah, sure.
Anonymous instances.
Yes, it doesn't work with anonymous instances, because if the instance is anonymous, then this would become the name of the instance.
Yeah.
But
I think it probably comes from even before that, when we started implementing this with Nicolas Horry, we of Haskell, where you really have this arrow for one class to the other. So you say C of X implies D of X. And I think that was mainly used for that. But I'm okay with. I think it can be deprecated. Yeah.
You could even be more violent, I guess.
Well, if it is mentioned in the documentation, I think it has to go through a
Deprecation phase.
And we don't need
deprecation circuit.
we don't need to be more violent, because if we deprecate now, we can remove in just 1 month.
Yes, fine.
And even less
Well,
than
not
that.
less than that.
Less than that.
When we branch.
When we branch. Yeah, in less than, in half a month.
In fact, you can remove it immediately in another PR that is going to be merged as soon as we branch.
okay, and this is easy to deprecate because it's just a warning in the parser. It's easy. This one is less easy.
So wait. What's your proposed restriction then? That after the colon you have a class. You must have a class.
No, the parser. There is a rule in the parser that says you are allowed to write for all. I just remove this rule.
Okay, so you have to have a class. Yeah.
Sorry.
So you have to have a class after the colon. After the.
Can you put an arrow after the column? Or A arrow B? Can you do that?
Probably.
No, but I mean, there was a special rule just for this for all.
Yes.
It's not the standard binding, whatever.
No.
Ah, okay, so.
But does it work? Work for non-record, like the definitional classes as well?
No, it's a special syntax that comes after instance. Sorry.
Right.
So you have to write instance.
Yes.
And then for all.
Yeah, but definitional classes because fit in that pattern. Like if you write just instead of writing class, there is a record just giving a name.
No. This is not a class syntax.
It's an instance.
Right. But what I'm saying is that the instance for that class
can be the same restriction.
But what Vincent is saying is that this syntax was implemented only for the instance keyword exactly.
Right. That I agree. But there are instances that are not necessarily recorded.
Yes.
Yes, I think it was coming just after in the examples. Definitional.
Yes.
Instances.
And those ones you might want to still have the for all on the right. The only thing.
Just to clarify what Mathieu said, I think it's not about allowing products or arrows on the right. It's more about how you bind.
Yes.
Yeah. And that Vincent is changing here is that he's using the usual binding.
So you could still have an arrow, but you have to put a lambda in the term to be explicit, right?
But
Yes, so
isn't there a risk that the warning, the deprecation warning, is going to occur even in cases where this rule wouldn't be used for parsing if it was removed?
that's a good point.
That was my point.
Good
Yeah, I
point.
think.
I don't see how it's in the parser. The parser just takes any term.
Okay.
Right
If
now,
you
there
want
is
an
a
ac-
for in the parser.
If you want an accurate warning, you need the piece of code that emits the warning to resolve the binding.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But you shouldn't do that one anyway.
Where is that? Parsing.
So maybe you can write this somewhere, and we need more to think more about it. So this was the simplest point, and I think the moral of the story is that we should not introduce this stuff in the first place. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe if warning is not possible, just remove the extra syntax.
Yeah.
There is no extra syntax as far as I can tell.
No, it's extra interpretation.
It's an extra
Yeah, it's
interpretation.
extra interpretation. Yes, you're right.
But it's implemented with an extra parser.
No,
no.
Oh, there is no.
The parsing is not
No,
going to
no,
change.
no.
So let's put the warning at interpretation time.
Yeah, that's easy to do.
Okay. Next point is
Okay. So some classes are defined without braces. So they only have one property, and I think they are called singleton classes.
Yeah.
And they are not records, so we cannot use the record syntax to define them.
Yeah.
But we can use the pseudo record syntax with simple braces.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so if you try to add pipes here and use the record syntax, you get an error that says, oh, P2 is not projection. But you can pretend it is.
Yeah.
I feel like this is bizutage for us.
and I'm not sure why this is the case. And because when we define the class, we explicitly made the decision that there are no braces here, and so this is not a record, and there is no projection.
Well, there is a projection in the sense that P2 is defined here, right?
Yeah, but it's
But
not
it's not a projection.
Yeah, it's the identity.
Conceptually a projection, but it's the identity. Yeah.
No, but I think there are two behaviors that seem to make sense, and the current one is none of the two.
Yeah.
Either you say you view this as a fake record, a fake projection, and then you allow the record syntax that you elaborate to something else.
Yeah.
Or you say it's not a record, it's not a projection, so there is no reason to use the record syntax. Both make sense. But allowing the pseudo record syntax and not the record syntax looks
like a bug.
Well, the idea was
strange design.
that classes were a distinct concept. I think the idea was just that. So, but I'm fine with
No,
allowing
they're
the
not
record
distinct because you can, for regular classes, for regular instances, you can use the regular record syntax. So they are not distinct.
Yeah.
They are sometimes the same, sometimes not.
Yeah, you can break that function.
Written an article which is called first class take classes.
Yeah, it's true. But it's just a matter of
So if it's a
syntax,
singleton, then you put the curly as different things. It does a unit type.
Yes.
The thing is that you can switch between singleton and non-singleton and not see a difference if you use the specific syntax.
This syntax.
Yeah.
But can't you just remove the warning, not the projection, or the error, not the projection? And
Because what do you elaborate to?
it depends on the class. You are inhabiting a class, so if the class is singleton, it's not.
It's just a definition.
So you use the record syntax and it doesn't actually produce a record.
Yeah, I would prefer the second
Maybe that's
solution
fine.
of.
And what about this kind of stuff? you write definition instead of instance, and you put a record here. Should this be allowed?
Hopefully not.
No, I think it's too weird. Yeah, we should just remove the brace syntax.
Yeah, just we already have a lot of problems about primitive projection and the like. Let's try not adding a new source of confusion regarding records.
So I2 prime.
The syntax is not necessary, exactly.
No, it's not.
Can you repeat your argument, Pierre-Marie?
I was saying people are mixing that we have a pile of problems related to the use of the confusion between primitive projections and non-primitive projections already. So let's not try to add another layer of confusion regarding definitional classes just for this very specific case.
Yeah.
So I would be in favor of prohibiting this kind of syntax. Or for now, just a warning, and then next version, get rid of it.
So what would be the syntax for a singleton instance? It would be without the braces?
Yeah, the
Yes,
last one, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So but you can give a name or not?
No.
No.
What do you mean give a name?
There is no name. This is the detrigger to.
You don't use P2 when defining the.
No, but it does define. The problem is this will break. So it's an identity. What it defines today is an identity with a specific type, and I'm pretty sure the name is used in some developments.
No. We're not talking about removing P2. We're just saying that the instances should be like I2 prime.
When you write
Only.
I2 prime, do we agree this is just elaborated by the syntax to 0 currently? There is no mention of P2 in the resulting term.
No.
No, so just for
But the question. Okay, sorry. Okay.
So P2 is already defined once and for all as the identity.
Yeah, the only thing you can do is to use the name P2 to build
To project.
instance.
Yeah.
To destruct.
To destruct instance.
Do nothing with it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, I mean, we're not going to do that because it's a design change, but what would be the point? I mean, what's the use of this kind of classes? I mean, a record with one field is perfectly fine to me. Why was it made so?
Because you get more definitional equalities. I think that was the main idea at the beginning.
In math classes,
But that seems more like a bug of the
feature for the
operator
annotations.
I mean, now that we have primitive records and projections.
No, I like
Yeah, it might be true that.
What's
it's
wrong with
not-
the singleton?
Having more definitional equalities, in my experience, is something that you typically don't want with type classes because you never know if they can be confused. I mean, what unification is going to do. So I don't think that's a very good argument. And then you have performance, probably. You're avoiding projecting operators, if that's what you said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Say
Okay.
This is just for class C.
But being able to apply the wrong lemma because it wasn't generalized to abstract operators doesn't seem very convincing either.
No, you just get more conversion. I mean, you don't really get more conversion because it's just projection of a record. It's just simpler conversion that you get, but you still get the same conversions if you use a record instead.
Okay, never mind.
If people use it.
But you're right in a way that with primitive projections, it's actually bad to use these singleton classes. So a typical thing it was used for was for these proper instances, where you index by a relation and a value, and you have you say that you are just a proof of R applied to M and M. But each time you project out of this, you repeat the relation and the morphism, even if it's a singleton class. Whereas with primitive projections, you would have less type annotations. So I think the initial motivation is no longer there.
Yes, you're right. For performance, it can be worse than a primitive record.
Yeah.
Because you don't direct parameters. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point because I'm pretty sure. I mean, probably this is an example where we can ask our users what they do with that today. But I wouldn't be surprised if at least a significant proportion of users do this because they think it's going to improve performance compared to records. At least that's the way I was using them. I never realized that.
maybe at extraction time it performs better than record.
A little bit more, yeah.
One direction.
It's one direction.
Well,
but then we will have the inverse problem is that people that do, if we say singleton classes are actually records, primitive records, then you will need to accept the last last kind of instance declarations and to say, oh, if it's a single record class, I don't need to mention the projection or something. I mean, what? Suppose we go the other way and we say we don't have singleton. If we didn't have singleton classes.
No, but if we replace singleton classes with primitive records, then we just remove the syntax that is not the record syntax, and we just require the record syntax. So we don't have to change the way you build a primitive record.
Yeah.
But so just one point is that we can ask users. I think it would be good to have some input on what they use this for today.
Yeah.
Just seriously, it's hard to know.
Yeah, I think the main users are math classes, but maybe there are many others. I think in VST, for example, they use primitive projection records all the time.
Yeah, probably Robert Krevers also uses these in his library. So, yeah. Before taking any decisions, we can ask them. What was the next problem?
Okay, next point is scoping rules. Now I have a class that is defined in a module N, and outside of the module, I want to define an instance of this class, and I did not import the module. So I need to qualify the name of the class, and if I use the record syntax, I need also to qualify the name of the projection. But if I use the just one brace, I don't need to qualify the name of the projection.
Yeah.
So it seems like there is a local import of the module M, but it's not exactly the case because I cannot refer to all the names that are.
No, it's just a kind of accident, actually.
The implementation of the class thingy is completely broken anyway. It's doing very fancy things that are not stable by all the substitutions. If you have a look at, I think it's called classes.
It helps.
Well, no, it does help, but you need to extract the meat from the troll. And I think what Pierre is saying is that if we want to support this, the not having to use the prefix, there is some implementation work to properly propagate substitutions. That is not done today. So
what do you need to propagate? I mean, basically when you're saying this happens because P3 in the class structure is just an ident. It does not get substituted.
But what if it comes from a functor?
I mean, it doesn't move. It doesn't change. It never changes.
It's just the end of the identity. not the stuff before the dots.
Yeah.
No, it's just that it could come from a functor argument, so it may have to be substituted before. I mean, it's the usual name.
No.
I don't know how this is implemented.
No, it's just an
The
idea.
suggestion by Vincent
And
that looks very reasonable to me.
In the produced stuff.
Hmm?
P3 does not even appear in the produced stuff. It's just syntax for.
Yeah.
It's just input syntax. The actually produced stuff is constructor applied to 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you need to resolve the name P3.
Yeah, maybe they are not in the order of the declaration.
It's more like it checks that the class m.c3 has a field called
Yeah.
C3.
It's a separate data structure from the projections defined in module M. That's
So
a
the question is, do we want this?
I don't think it was intentional that this happens, but
Designed by accident?
yeah.
Yeah, my main motivation in all of these points, is that there is a difference between what is possible when using the record syntax and when using the single brace syntax.
Yeah.
And I find weird that the behaviors are different.
So the only worry I have about your suggestion, Vincent, is that we have no way to do local imports. So importing has other effects. And not only we have no local imports, but we have no way of importing only a kind of objects like names. So I don't know in practice for users of this feature if it's as easy as adding an import, because it might break things. It might import conversions, stuff like that.
I mean, there
is
Yeah, this is why I suggest to qualify the projection instead of importing the whole module.
And also we could,
Can we even
if we were really clever, we would have kind of bidirectional type checking, which would tell us that if you're building a record in m.c3, then you can use p3 unqualified, and it would work for all records.
Ocaml has this kind of syntax.
Yes.
Yes, but it emits a warning when you do that, because precisely it's seen as a bad practice to rely on the type, which may change the infer type. I mean, so it's a bit different here.
So it's possible to do that in Coq anyway, because we have the two phases. We don't have the type information at the time we do the type, so the things are resolved already at the time we start type checking things, I guess.
Yeah, we would need to late resolve it.
Syntax is bigger.
No, but the globalization phase has no types. So
yeah. So you don't.
Either we had another thing that is half resolved.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
I mean, that happens in Agda, for example, you can name constructors of different inductives the same names. And depending on the type at which you're using it, you get different objects. It can be useful to reuse notations, but I don't know if it's a design choice.
I don't know in general, but in the current Coq system, I think that's a terrible idea, because when you, let's say type inference does fancy stuff. Yeah. When you change that, you slightly change its behavior. It's already a nightmare to understand the impact on existing code. And this is just adding a feature that will make it even harder. Because if you change the infer type, for example, between, two records that look like this.
No, but it's not an infer type, precisely, it's a check type. It's a type that the user gave. So that's the main point of bidirectional type.
So what would happen if the user doesn't give the type?
Then the bidirectional hint would not apply, and it would just say it's ambiguous.
But then you would have so you have a term that has type T. When you put column T, then it works, and it says yes, it has type T. But if you remove column T, it says no.
It's ambiguous.
It's not valid.
It happens all the time.
That's good.
It happens due to unification all the time. We don't have principal types and so on.
Yeah, okay.
I have another argument. I mean, in the entire system, either a module is imported and then you refer to things unqualified, or it is not and you qualify.
No, that's not true. There is this mixed import code, feature code. You
Just
can
the syntax for
Okay, so
import.
it's not a
No, no, no.
We have a very good remark by Gaëtan here.
So it's not an import at all. Okay, you can put foobar.p3 instead of p3. It will still work.
Yeah,
so foobar doesn't.
In i3, you can just write.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's going to fail anyway. But on the one before,
Interesting.
And the one
It
before?
works.
It fails.
it fails.
Any
Because-
qualification is
Ah,
discarded.
Yeah, but on the one
So
before.
now fails.
So it's okay.
So what?
So it's completely broken.
So what's the argument then? That we already can pass the model name before in front of
Any
the projection.
qualification is discarded.
No, but it's just ignored.
I just take the last.
It's horrendous.
So we should. This is the bug. We should fix that.
That's a bug, yeah, clearly.
Thank you, Gaëtan.
Okay.
But do you want to just one or deprecate in that case?
I don't know the difference.
So, but I mean, if you deprecate, you should also do something correct when the user puts m.p3 there.
No, what?
Sure.
You
Of
cannot
course.
deprecate without giving him a syntax to.
Yeah.
No. The suggestion is to not only to qualify, but also to put pipes. And it will fix both problems.
I swear.
No.
No?
This is different. Adding pipes here has other effects.
But I thought the whole point of these problems was to make this
Yeah,
possible.
but there is a fourth point
Yeah.
that you can see here,
Mhm.
and which sorry.
And then instead of the XX and put pipes.
And then and pipes. Yeah, this works.
And if you replace with XX, this won't work. I hope.
This should not
It should fail. Yeah.
Doesn't.
And it's okay.
So
Yes.
yeah,
So that's
basically
saying
the
already.
other.
So it's just with a single brace that the.
Yes.
A single
Yeah.
brace is handled specifically.
Completely broken.
It's the, I don't understand. Is it that we should move in the direction of removing the whole single brace notation?
It's the direction, yes.
That's the goal. Yeah.
But it's not easy.
But
We
want
should
to
have
figure
started
out
with
what
this.
should be removed and what should be added to the pipe syntax.
Yeah, I think that's what this list is trying to make explicit.
But
What is missing?
at least if you duplicate the whole single brace thing, you won't have the problem of providing an alternative way of doing right things with this.
Well,
I think that
But it makes the problem non-independent.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Hmm.
So you have to solve all of them so that the suggestion makes sense.
Hmm.
So unclear.
Hmm.
But let's see the fourth point.
So the last point, I have no example to show, but it's bidirectional type checking, and I'm not very familiar with what's going on there. But basically, when you use the single brace syntax, you have bidirectional type checking,
Mhm.
and so you can type check more terms.
So the idea is pretty simple, is that if the user wrote m.c3 applied to A and B, then I know that the parameters of the record are going to be A and B, and I fill them. And then type checking of the rest of the record is using that information, whereas in Coq, usually you don't. You wait for the end of the constructor application to coerce it to the type that the user gave, which is wrong. In general, I think.
Yes.
It makes a type checking of sigma, any kind of dependent records, complicated, where it should not be, because in general, the user knows in which record type it will fall.
Yeah, I know MPI is complaining a lot about that. For instance, it wants bidirectional typing of constructors in general.
So there is it's currently conditional on the program flag, and I think it would be pretty easy to just make it independent and allow enabling it globally, because that's a feature people will want independently of program or anything like that, or instance, or
And is there a drawback in enabling this all the time?
Compatibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, but apart from compatibility,
But I think you take strictly more. So it's
that was my question basically. But strictly more, even in taking into account time.
I mean, I'm sure there is someone who has some crazy example where they optimize with this input.
At least we can provide a flag for that, and I know like a few users that would be really happy about it.
Yeah.
Because they are forced to use program currently, and it does things they don't want to do actually.
Yes, but if the only reason to keep the old behavior is compatibility, I would argue that the right default would be to have it on, and then the compatibility flag probably to.
Yeah, I think
just behavior.
version 3 should do that, but yes, I think so as well.
Yes, so next version. But...
Just curious, in the code, how much is tied to constructors? Because I mean, sometimes you want to invert the order of unification problems also for standard constants.
Right now, it's just for inductives and constructors. Yeah.
But what is is there something fundamental that makes it applicable only to constructors?
Well, it's a case where you can always apply it, and it's a sound way of doing type checking. But for constants, you might choose too early some solutions in unification. I mean, you might get solutions that you don't want for constants when you have multiple possibilities.
Yeah, what I have in mind for constant is either the user says after these three arguments, or there is a general heuristic that says heuristic. I mean, I think it's even if you are in Renex form for all and then arrows, once you process the for all arguments, you can already unify the target.
I think it's not unique. I think it's not correct. I tried that one during my thesis, and I think it was not working.
Can I hijack this conversation for a few seconds?
Anyway.
Yeah, but this point should be.
But the user specification, yes.
For those of us who, like me, need slow motion, I will be interested.
Anyway, so what should I look at in the code to see the? I mean, I said in program mode, I do it for constructors.
Yeah, it's in the.
So
you navigate through the ocean of each program mode.
So the thing is not a constructor applied. If the type expected is an inductive, I do that.
It must be an inductive, and the value must be a constructor of that inductive.
Okay, because I mean, we had this in Matita too, but it's horrible that if you define just an alias for the constructor, then it's not. I mean, it doesn't follow the alias because it doesn't. It said, "Oh, it's a constant."
Yeah. No, I think the first suggestion you had, where the user can say when things should be type checked, would be the best one.
Yeah, exactly. So more generally, I have requests from people to be able to specifically attach a resolution mechanism to the constant in a way that is somehow similar to typeclasses, but much more local, where you can say, please fill this hole using that tactic, knowing the constants around that and this kind of stuff. So it could be made to fit in a much more general setting where we say, oh, we can actually say this thing is going to be part of the original, that one's going to be that thing. Yeah.
Good luck with the arguments syntax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes in there. Just in more symbols on the keyboard.
All right, so are we done with this instance thing?
I think I'm done.
There is a feature of instance where you can define these trivial classes if you do just class the name, the parameters, and then dot. So no colon equal. And then if you do instance no colon equal again, it always succeeds without opening the proof.
Yeah, so there's this point we didn't talk about that there is this implicit feeling of the body of an instance when it's an empty record, or when you're using program when all things can be solved by obligation. So you didn't
Yes.
discuss that part, but that's orthogonal to this.
Isn't it related to bidirectional type checking?
No, not really.
Do you understand correct? That is the usual issue when you write instance, you don't know if you open a proof or not.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
the thing.
Yeah.
Then any figure would be very welcome.
Yeah.
You pick it. I don't care.
So right now we don't even have a warning. Just when you.
But I think
But the fact that you don't know if you open the proof or not is not the problem. And we said that many times. There are many commands that may open a proof or not, and it's not a problem. The problem is that on top of that, when it does open a proof, the syntax is not well parenthesized. Like you can put instance again. You have no strict delimiters, but you don't. I mean, it doesn't enforce the user to put strict delimiters.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really.
No, that's what. Yeah, that's what I mean.
It means not only may or may not open the proof, but if you think you finished the proof, and in fact you're declaring another instance,
Hmm.
Yeah.
it becomes a nested proof.
Yeah. Which are the other comments that may or may not open a proof?
when you are in program mode,
Yeah,
When the
basically
fixed point-
all of them.
Didn't we say at some point that we were going to make proof mandatory?
Yeah, here Steve wants to.
Also it.
It's like
You mean for everything or just?
as soon as you have a proof opened and you're trying to write something in the solve mode or whatever that's called, proof mode.
Yeah.
Proof mode. If you didn't write proof somewhere, then you get a warning.
At least a warning.
At least a warning, and time later.
We were soon going to reach the discussion about proof was followed by the proof term, and this is a PR that is
Oh, I removed it from
on the
the.
discussion list.
I removed it.
The proof by something. So what is the status of that one?
The deprecation of that one.
Yes.
So last time, I tried just before the 8.7 freeze, and Guillaume Melchion said he uses that and doesn't want it to be depleted until there is an alternative. So that's why I was saying that I would do remad. So,
Exactly.
Sorry.
Proof exact. What is the problem with exact?
I mean, proof exact is closer an alternative proof.
Yeah, I agree. That's why. So the discussion was just. So I just removed this one also from the 8.8 my instance. So if you want to push it, that's fine with me, but I'm not the one doing it. So.
But I think we are drifting to another issue. The issue is that you can start a proof with no. Is that you cannot say this command does not start a proof. In the absence of proof, could
Yes,
be
exactly.
It's something different. I mean, I know people that say fail show after instance just to be sure that the instance was.
Yeah, this is the missing bit. So having one command that may or may not open a proof is not a disaster as long as you require the user to express in the document whether that occurrence of the command is expected to open a proof or not. It doesn't have to be the command itself. But if there is nothing that tells you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, given that it's automation that decides if there will be a proof or not, well,
Yeah, you can do a static analyzer that reembeds a high order unification and things like that.
But didn't we have with the refined instance mode of Camari? If you write a bracket, braces with the pipes for an instance declaration, in the strict mode, you know that that indeed this should be the mode.
Yes. So basically, this implements one mode in which you have guarantees.
Yeah.
But this is not what we want.
Uh-huh.
What we want is that there is no way to escape the safe.
No, but what I'm saying is that should be the only mode, no?
I think I remember hearing from some users that it was not doing what it was expected to do. Isn't there an issue about that, Yamari? Do you remember?
What?
Wasn't there an issue about refine
interactive refined mode, whatever.
That doesn't do what it was expected to do.
What issue was? I don't remember such a thing. I think I saw something mentioning it. For instance, refine.
To make a car, to make an option like this or something. I don't remember exactly.
Yes, it's no wait.
Which number is that?
I think it was issue 3632.
3632.
But I don't remember.
No. Yeah. What?
Even if you disable, if you're in the safe mode, if you just put dot without colon equal, you still have no guarantees.
Oh.
So it doesn't solve the problem Enrico just mentioned, basically.
I added a comment saying that it should have the desired behavior by now, and then what?
No, but later on.
Immediate complaint.
I don't know. Okay, we will need to reread the entire thing, but I think if you put, okay, the problem is if you put instance foo column A dot whatever mode you're in, it may or may not open a proof. And you have still no way to assert it should not open the proof.
Yes.
And the funny part is that the recommended fix to this was in this scenario, the user was expected to put column equal underscore dot and force resolution, but it turns out that it doesn't have the same behavior.
No.
So they were a bit lost. So this is this discussion, and I think we should address that quickly. Whether it's for this release or not, I don't care.
But still, it would be solved by forcing the user to write proof. Anyway.
But what if it
Probably.
doesn't? What happens if you do instance? It opens a proof, and you start to do instance again. What happens?
Error.
System?
Error, yeah.
Error?
Yes.
No, but then
Because there is a subgoal.
So you mean for nested lemmas, you would have to do lemma proof lemma, right?
Yes.
Like instance proof instance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that would work.
Well parenthesized.
Yes.
But my point was just that Kamai's flag is not a solution to this problem. It's a solution.
It's dynamic. The problem is that it's dynamic check, so it's not. It's a workaround. But the true solution is to force the user to write well-delimited syntax to signify to the machine that this is indeed opening a proof.
Yeah.
And like we just need to find Guillaume and hit him strongly in the head so that he accepts the fact that we get rid of the proof by syntax.
Yeah, but there too, I think there are some differences that are a bit subtle. But okay, so can we have the? I think we're done with this instant thing. Can we do very briefly the hook thing and then have lunch?
Yeah.
Would it work?
Yeah. What about the? Yeah. You merged Gaetan's PR, right? About white space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which one? Your white space check.
In the hook. In the suggestion.
Yeah. So
it was merged.
Yeah, if it was merged, then you just have to do one more configure, and then you have the hook, right?
If you don't already have one.
If you don't already have one.
And so Enrico wanted 5 minutes to explain the problem or the thing, and then a 10-minute discussion. So we should go for lunch at 5:30.
What did you say? Is it related to what I'm going to say? And
it's what should run on CI and what should run in your pre-push commit hook.
Yes, but the pull request of Gaetan you were talking about?
I didn't talk about. I was asked if it was word.
No, it was just about white space. It's unrelated to CI.
No, but it's related to what.
But to the linter. Yes.
It's related to what you. Enrico, you added, for instance, a hook pre-commit.
On fait 10 minutes. So we're going to have to do it in 10 minutes because there's a group of 80 people going for lunch at 1:30 here. So
Okay.
let's.
So what I wanted to I'm mixing many things. So CI is great, but it's a pain in the ass because it takes hours to get the feedback. Okay. So I think that all the checks that run on CI, so make my forecast fail, but can also run my PC in a millisecond, should run on my PC too, so that I don't push commits, for example, that contain white spaces problems, or what was the other thing? Or that contain warnings that will be detected by Travis 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there are two. For example, for the warning, I didn't even know that there was a flag to configure to turn warning into errors in my PC. And the reason is that I cannot follow all the forecasts. This is why I opened the forecasts where I add to configure an option dash profile, and then you specify which kind of users you are, for example, developer, that turns on all the checks that, like this one, that it's better to run on my PC rather than just later on Trace. Okay, so even if I don't know that Gaetan implemented this warn error thing, or Emilio, I don't know who did it, if you add it to this set of flags that are enabled by default on all developers' PCs, they don't need to follow the forecast. The next time they reconfigure code, they get the right flags.
Is there a way to override the default? Because I'm a developer, but sometimes I don't want to.
Yeah, so the code is imperative, so you should say profile developer, and then I don't know if there is a warn as error off.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay,
so that would be a problem.
Yeah, there should be a way to turn flags on and off, not just on. Okay, but this is orthogonal. So this is what I wanted to say.
So
next time you
it's not orthogonal, actually. It's not orthogonal to your PR.
I will fix that.
Yeah.
I think. It's just that next time you add a check on Travis and also flag on the configure, remember to add it to the developer profile so that even developers that cannot follow forecast get the flag on their PC. That's all about it. And then in the other thing, for the white space, I don't know what Gaetan did, but I think we should really check it statically before pushing. So I wrote a pre-push book. I don't know if it is the same thing.
I forgot what you put in the pre-push, but originally.
Oh, I just check if there is an error, if there is a white space error, and if there is one, I abort the push and tell the user, hey, look, you should rebase white space fix.
But what commits does it check?
It checks the one you are pushing.
What? Only one?
No, the ones you are pushing.
What does that mean?
You cannot push a commit that
it's
contains
a
a
range
white
of
space
commits.
error.
You push a range of commits.
That are not on the reload? Is that how it works?
I don't know exactly how I did it, but that's roughly it. Yeah.
Because I thought Git would know that only later, but okay.
But anyways, Gaetan's PR implemented a pre-commit hook that not only checks for white spaces, but also
Fine.
and it's installed in your pre-commit hooks if you don't already have one. When you run configure.
That's fine for me. I think I saw the forecast actually, but it had a bit of problem. It has few problems. Right?
Yeah, but
it took a long time to merge.
Okay.
But now it is
That's fine.
So now nobody should have white space problems.
I don't see the pre-push PR. What's the number?
No, there is no pre-push PR. It's in the wiki.
All right.
In the wiki, I made a page called developer setup or something like that, listing all the things developers should use. So if this is not relevant anymore, remove it.
Okay, so lunch, and we start at 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Sure.
Please?
Mm.
All right. See you.
Yep.
Ah, bah oui, c'est commentaire